living fully alive in every way. You're listening to Relationship Prescriptions with Dr. Carol.
How does your marriage weather the storms? I'm Dr. Carol, and this is Relationship Prescriptions. Thank you for joining me. The challenges that we are facing in our current world are unique, and your marriage is facing those challenges as well. Every aspect of our lives has been disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic, whether that's because you're stuck at home with your spouse and you're not used to that, whether there are underlying issues in your relationship that you could keep covered up before and now they're coming to the surface, whether there are financial or children or other outside stresses that your marriage is having to deal with now that you hadn't had to deal with before. All of those things can create enormous burdens and pressure on your relationship, on your marriage. Pressure opens up what is inside. And perhaps you are seeing some things in your marriage that you hadn't expected or that are now harder to ignore and aren't particularly pleasant. Well, you are not alone. Every marriage is facing some degree of stress in this environment. Jeff and Sarah Walton, my guests today, have been through a lot of stress. Now, not simply related to this COVID-19 pandemic, but for years. Jeff and Sarah Walton has been married for 16 years. They have several children. There have been numerous challenges in their marriage, big and little, inside and outside, relationship-wise, financial-wise, related to health, related to children. Just, it seems like their story, when you hear their story, it's like everything just piles up. But Jeff and Sarah are still together. And I believe this is an amazingly good time for me to share their story with you, for you to hear how Jeff and Sarah have made it through their storms, and hear some encouraging and practical ways that your marriage can make it through the storms that you are facing. They have a book that's releasing brand new just this week, Together Through the Storms, Biblical Encouragement for Your Marriage When Life Hurts. And for many of us, life does hurt right now. So without waiting any longer, here's my conversation with Jeff and Sarah Walton. Well, Jeff and Sarah, you have so much to share. Your book coming out, your story, your family. I want to just start by thanking you for your transparency and willingness to be a tool in what God wants to do in people's lives and in marriages.
Well, thank you very much. It really, to God be the glory. He is the one that has sustained and is the one that is giving us anything to share. So it's a privilege.
Yeah, thank you for having us on.
Yeah. Together through the storms, storms come. Your storms in your family began not long after your marriage. You write about how you started at a beautiful wedding day, and probably like most couples, you hope and expect that everything is going to be, beautiful ever after. But it wasn't that long when storms started to come into your life. And let me just give you opportunity to kind of give the highlights of what those storms looked like and just kept building and building in your marriage.
Yeah, sure. So like you said, we got married a little bit younger. I was actually 20, he was 23. And so we were we were ready to take on life together. And it was about, I started actually having some health issues not long after, but our real storm started when we had our first son. And he initially just was hospitalized with some unknown illness that we didn't know. So that kind of threw us suddenly at 7 weeks old into unknowns. Wow. And we ended up leaving the hospital without really any answers. We had some very scary moments that we thought we might lose him. And then 5 days later, we went home with no answers. And so we kind of thought that was our storm. We were done. But in the long run, what happened is we continued to experience more and more challenges with him. Very, very long story short, he started to struggle with lots of extreme behavioral challenges, neurological issues, behaviors that just were strange. We didn't know what to do with. And so that launched us into doctor after doctor after doctor, trying to figure out how we could help him, help our family, because it was consuming our lives. I was taking care of him all day long with tantrums, with long, long raging episodes, and it wasn't safe for any of us. So
Yeah.
that was kind of our journey with him, that continues to this day to varying degrees. At the same time, he was on call. He was a trauma consultant. So he was gone 24/7, in and out, no schedule. And so it was leaving me alone a lot to take care of what was happening. And so that, I think what built next on that is I started needing ankle surgeries. I had an ankle injury that started to cause a degeneration in my ankle. And so here I was as a mom with, at this point, I think I had 3 kids, and they were getting more difficult to care for because I was struggling to walk. And so I've had subsequent surgery since then. Now I've had 5 since last year, and I'm struggling to walk, and I'm not sure what that future will look like. So that was kind of another layer.
Yeah.
And then it got to, I think, about 5 years ago, things started to come to a head. I was very, very sick at this point. We didn't know what was going on, but my health had just been declining. All of our kids started exhibiting different sickness, different symptoms that we didn't know what they were related to. And he was gone all the time. And so the Lord kind of put us in a corner where we had to make some hard decisions, which, long story short, meant he left his job. We lost quite a bit of our income, had to sell our dream home, downsized. And then within that year, we found out that I had Lyme disease, and all 4 of our kids did as well. And then about a year after that, he lost his job. So it did feel like one thing after another. And, those are the big things. Sometimes the things that have worn us out the most have been all the little things that have come in between there that have kind of felt like, no more, Lord, we can't handle anymore.
Exactly.
But he has been so faithful. He has carried us through. There have been lots of other things in between there. But he has been so good. And that is what's been a blessing to share with others right now who are now experiencing a lot of their own real deep suffering.
And that's why you're sharing your story together through the storms. Jeff, what was it like for you to, first of all, just watch your wife and then all your children struggle in this way, and then, your loss with losing the income and losing the job? That's got to be heavy on a man, on a husband, on a father.
Yeah, it certainly is. And it's a lot to balance when you're trying to lead your family and then also do your job well. So both inside the house and outside the house. And it was a lot of tension just going back and forth where I saw Sarah hurting at home and her desperately needing me, but at the same time, getting called out by doctors to go help consult in the OR with them. And it was kind of that tug and pull where I was trying to be loyal to my job, but then also that meant that I was leaving her often with a lot of difficult challenges where she was really crying out, Jeff, please stay home.
Yeah.
And so that there was a lot of tearing down of some of our trust and just frustration and resentment, and a lot of those things that just really became evident in our marriage that were hard to deal with. But I think ultimately where that came to a point where the Lord was starting to change my heart and really calling me to make a bold move and step out in faith and say, I need to step away from this job that I really enjoyed for the sake of my family. Now, they weren't able to count on me for being home at bedtime or being home on the weekends or for holidays. And so when you start to see your kids growing up, and then also on top of that, all that Sarah had to bear on her own, and she couldn't count on me because I was coming and going, that's ultimately what led us for God saying you need to walk away from this. And then with that, as Sarah mentioned, that pay financial cut to our family really was a huge hit. And then we had to leave our dream home that we thought we'd grow old in.
Yeah. Yeah. All the things that you have talked about seem to involve losses, and loss involves grief, and people deal with that differently. Your health and the children you thought would be fine, and now they're struggling, and your finances in your home, having to let go of all those things. what did that look like differently for the two of you? Grief often looks different between different people.
Yeah, and that's why we really wanted to have a chapter on that in the book, because we also have walked with a lot of friends as they've gone through their own various kinds of grief. And that has been one very consistent thing, is that the husband and the wife typically have very different ways of grieving. It's not always male, female. Sometimes it is a little bit, but we all have different personalities. We have different lenses that we're looking through, maybe past that we've come from. And so it's been really helpful to realize that we are going to look a little different in our grieving. For me, I needed to process it out. I needed to talk about it.
Yeah.
I needed to have bouts of crying and just kind of acknowledging that this is really hard. I don't understand this. And I needed a listening ear. I didn't need him to fix it. I just wanted him to listen and be able to encourage me and grieve with me. Whereas he maybe would have been more, would you say, tempted to dive into work maybe a little bit more?
Yeah, it certainly went into cycles for me. So for those 9 years where I was on call, a lot of times I was able to compartmentalize that, and there was the chaos at home. But then when I left, I was able to, shift gears and kind of focus on my work and what I had to do. So in some ways I kind of had that, I guess that luxury of being able to escape for a little bit and kind of clear my head and kind of do my job. But then when I came home, now I was trying to switch back and to enter back into her hurt, where maybe I've been gone for 5 hours. And then it's really hard to re-enter, and for our relationship to pick up where we left off, where she's still dealing with a lot of, you just walked out and now I'm in a good mood because work maybe went well, and now I'm trying to enter back into something that we're trying to work out. And so there was a lot of miscommunication on my part, and a lot of things that we've had to grow in over the years of how do we communicate where we know that we are going to face trials differently and we need to process them differently. So ultimately we have to take those both to the Lord first and foremost. And if we're not in God's word daily, and if we're not praying consistently, and all of our pain and our confusion and just all those emotions that we're feeling, if we don't take those to the Lord first and foremost, then we know this relationship right here as husband and wife is really going to be hurting.
Yeah, so we really have had to learn how to grieve well together. And that, like he said, I think that starts by learning what to do with our own grief, by going to the Lord, because we also can't expect our spouse to know what to do with all of our feelings and to have all the answers. And so we can make that mistake too, where we kind of dump it on each other and we aren't going to the Lord at all with that. But it is so important to just even have the grace to let each other grieve in our own different ways and to communicate. It was helpful for me just to know when he would say, I'm just struggling with this right now. I just need the space to maybe struggle through some of this. And then I knew we were maybe in different places, but we were both going through it together. And that alone helped us kind of walk through it side by side.
Yeah. So many of the things that you guys have said in the last few minutes about going through the storms that hit your marriage and family, I'm sure resonate with couples who are going through storms right now. Although the COVID-19 pandemic was not your storm, although it is right now, but just things that are hitting couples right now, the financial loss, the uncertainty about the future with health and all of that, and the impact on relationships. And let me just ask you to comment on maybe what you hear from friends or others around you, how this current crisis that is affecting everybody in the world in some way, how some of the things that you have experienced in your marriage are really just playing out with this current big storm that is impacting probably every family who's listening and watching.
Sure. So I think the first thing is we want to know that we're hurting with all those that are dealing with all types of challenges right now. As you mentioned, from health to financial to relational, whatever that may look like. For us, we, as Sarah may have mentioned, I think earlier, that I've been through 2 different job losses due to company-wide layoffs 5 years ago and then at the end of last year. So I'm still currently in job transition and now flooded with millions and millions of others as well in that same boat of looking for our next opportunity when all this passes. And so with that, I would say you have that bucket, but then you also have the bucket that everyone's working remotely.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to deal with how are we going to manage kids being home, homeschooling them, doing all the e-learning, and then also the husband or the wife trying to find space to do their office and work remotely, which creates a lot of challenges as well. Mm-hmm. And so one of the biggest things I guess I want to challenge, I guess from my end for husbands, and it could be either way, either husband or spouse, but just for husbands in general, is to not just check out and say, I'm going up to my office up in our, up on the second story, and I'm there from 7:30 until 6 o'clock. And then it dumps everything on your spouse. And so, that looks different for every family. Both spouses are still working. Maybe one is just the only provider. So that I realize that looks different. But the biggest thing is really communicating about that and having a plan. Because if you just go into it and try and adapt and try and respond in a good way, I think that's going to ultimately unravel and be a disaster. So we need to prayerfully go into these days where they are truly hard. And you have pressures that we've never seen before, financial. And as you mentioned, you're bound to know somebody that has a sickness. Yeah. And maybe, hopefully there's not many that will watch it that knows someone that has their life taken from this awful virus, but there's probably a good chance of that as well. And so back to what we just spoke about is grieving the losses. We have to have God's word hidden in our heart, daily being able to go to him again with just these challenging days of, he wants to hear from us of why, Lord, why would you allow me to lose my job? Why would you allow us not to be able to pay rent next month? Why are you taking my mom, who now has a virus? Whatever that situation is, we have to go to Christ first and foremost, because without him, we are like the rest of non-believers then, where our complaining just goes in a vicious cycle, and then there's no off-ramp for us to get back to our trusting and looking to Christ as our faithful and loving King that he is.
Yeah, and also just to add to that, we are all experiencing new things we've never really experienced before. I've never been in my home with my family where I've never left the house. I think it's been over 2 weeks where I've stepped outside of the house. And all of a sudden my kids are trying to adapt to, what does this look like to learn at home? And I'm not used to mom teaching me. I don't want to do what mom's saying, so there's all these new challenges that we're all facing. And so I think it's first just also acknowledging with each other, how is this affecting you? And being able to be open with each other about those struggles is really important, because we both are probably facing different challenges. But I think we both would say what we are really wanting to encourage couples with right now is that all that we have gone through, God has been faithful day after day after day after day. And not only has he been faithful, but we can honestly look back and say we are so grateful for everything he's taken us through, because it has actually loosened our grip on this world in such a good way. And it has filled us so much more with him, so that we aren't so tethered. And so these losses we're facing, we're actually finding ourselves a little less rattled than I'd say we would have been in the past, because we've already felt a lot of our fingers being pried off of many of these things in the world. And it's not that we don't struggle, we really certainly do, but we have seen how the Lord has given us more of a steadfastness as we learn quicker to lean into him when we feel these losses again, because we've seen him be so faithful to give us something greater if he takes something away. And so we just want couples to keep that focus, that none of this will be left pointless, and Christ wants to redeem all of this in one way or another. And so to keep our eyes fixed on that truth.
Healthy perspective. Thanks for saying that, because I think that applies regardless of what storms, we're going through at the moment. Something that I just like to get a bit real about. You have a couple chapters in your book about how these storms impact your own relationship and intimacy, physical intimacy, relational, I'm sure spiritual intimacy. Let's just get real for a minute and share a bit how you guys have wrestled with that and what kind of insight or encouragement might you give to other couples who feel like they're pulling apart, they're, the sex is impacted, the understanding between each other is impacted. Just get real for a minute here.
Yes, this, as anybody knows, is such a complex challenge. And so there are no simple answers by any means. And this definitely looks different for everybody because there's a lot of unique struggles. But I will say we had a lot of layered challenges that affected this right away. One, I had health issues, so that adds complications. He was gone a lot. So when he came home, I was often exhausted mentally, emotionally. But then there's also challenges when there's trust that is struggling, is maybe broken a little bit, and there's the communication's not happening. And so what that can end up doing is we get in this cycle of wanting to receive from the other or demand from the other whatever we are thinking we need. And that never ends up going anywhere good. And so what I think the Lord has really grown in us is the center of our intimacy needs to be first being understood that Christ alone is the one that can satisfy our deepest needs. Because if we're looking to each other first and foremost in any way, we're ultimately not going to be satisfied. Yeah. And the second thing is that we have to remember that intimacy is a whole of the marriage. And so we can't neglect any of them. We can't just focus on the physical intimacy if we aren't connecting at all on an emotional way or spiritually or in any other way. Neither spouse can expect that that's going to be a healthy physical relationship. So it's important to maybe take a little bit of a measurement of where is the health in all different areas of our intimacy in our marriage. And if one area is clearly not healthy, could that be a reason why that's impacting our physical intimacy as well? So just remembering that can be helpful. But then also a big part of that is thinking, how can I serve and love my spouse? I know there have been a time when I was really, really struggling and we were on totally different planets. I mean, in the intimacy realm, I was really wrestling with things. He was probably not even aware of the depth of what I was wrestling with. And so it was a really difficult season, but I had to realize that I couldn't make him understand what I was struggling with, despite how much I explained it. And I had to go to the Lord and I needed to pray for our relationship in that area and ask God to do a work that only He could do. Because sometimes it is out of our control. There are some challenges that are just unique to relationships. Sometimes it's physical pain in that area of our relationship. Sometimes there's trust that's broken and the one spouse is not on the same playing field and they're not hearing us. So there's some points we have to remember that God is the one that can change a heart. And God is the one that can redeem and heal marriages. And so if we're not going there first, we're trying to fix this part of our marriage, that may not actually help. And so doing that first, and then as hard as it is, trying to be open in the communication of the areas that we're struggling. Like right now, if a husband has lost his job, he may be really struggling with maybe his pride, maybe his identity. And so he may not want to be vulnerable with his wife. The wife may be feeling that from him and maybe sensing he just doesn't want to be near her, where it could be something completely different. So communication in this area, which I know is probably what everybody says, but it is so crucial, especially now, because everything is up in the air. And so we need to be open about it.
Yeah. And I think one thing to add to that, it's so easy for me, no matter what I am struggling with in life, that I try and fix it without going first to the Lord. And so I just want to challenge again that the men or even both spouses, that if intimacy is a challenge, and I'm sure at some point it will be for those listening, pray that God would grow that desire in both of you. Have grace for your spouse who might have a high view, if we're talking about sexual intimacy, a high view, and you may have a low view. And so there's going to be a gap there. Pray that you can meet in the middle and that God would fill that satisfaction first and foremost. And I think a verse that has really challenged me is out of Romans, where it says, outdo one another in love, or in honor is what it actually says. And so we're both very competitive. I take that personally of how can I serve Sarah and how can I outdo her today by showing her honor and love. And it's that sacrifice, and it's praying again that Christ is working in me, make me more Christ-like today. And it's hard. It is really hard because I have my needs and I have my wants and my expectations. And it's, again, stripping those away and coming before Christ and trying to lay those before him each and every day. It's a daily thing. You have to be grounded in Christ, because apart from him, we are weak and we are two sinners married, and it's not going to be working out well if we try on our own strength.
Yeah. And just one real quick note to husbands is the biggest changing point I think that happened in our marriage, something that he did that really changed a lot for me, was he made such an effort to make sure I knew that he loved me for every part of me, not just sexually. And for a wife, that is so important to know that he was doing things to serve me and to love me and to help me, not just a mean to an end, that he was wanting something from that, but he genuinely wanted to love me and serve me and make sure I knew that I was cared for, not just physically, but because of me as a whole. And that just really helped build that trust in a relationship. And that's really important for both to understand.
That's great. And thanks for sharing that. You were able to hear from him that he loved you for you, not just for your body. And I hear that from other couples too. And thanks for making that so clear, because it makes such a difference. What role did forgiveness play in going through these storms in your marriage? I'm sure it must have been a factor.
Yes. Yeah, it really was. I mean, any relationship on earth is going to require forgiveness. And especially the one when you live with them, right? It's been really helpful. I actually wrote about this in the book. One thing that really helped with me with forgiveness is understanding that forgiveness is both vertical and horizontal. And so when there was something that was going on between the two of us, I needed to first be able to take it to the Lord and ask God to give me the strength to forgive him to the Lord. So saying to the Lord, I need your help to truly forgive him for what he's done that feels hurtful to me. And then the relationship sometimes takes time. There might be situations where maybe even the spouse isn't asking for forgiveness and they aren't repentant. Yeah. And so that's where it's so crucial to understand that I can still forgive my spouse in a vertical way. Even if the horizontal relationship is still struggling right now, so that if my spouse does come to me and they are repentant, my heart will be ready to forgive in the restoration aspect. But that's always going to be a dance in a marriage, is we're going to be hurting each other without knowing it. Sometimes we will misstep and say something that's hurtful unknowingly. Sometimes we will knowingly hurt our spouse. And so having that, the humility to say, I know I have hurt you. I need to be able to also receive time to be able to forgive you when you have hurt me. And I would say also the other part is understanding there's an event and a process. So the event, I'm trying to remember, I wrote who said this in the book. I can't remember who wrote this, but you can check that out. But this was really helpful to understand that we forgive, but it doesn't mean all the memories of it go away. And so we have to continually, as feelings maybe rise up again and we start rehearsing, oh, you did that one time and now I'm holding that against you again. I need to forgive again. I need to remind myself, no, I've forgiven this. Christ has forgiven this. And that may have to happen time and time and time again. And so that's actually helpful, because sometimes we beat ourselves up. Like, I thought I forgave him for this. Why am I struggling with it still? But still, trust may need to be rebuilt. We may need to reestablish a part of the relationship that was hurt. And then also, what about, you want to just talk to forbearance a little bit? Just being gracious.
Yeah. And so I think that the biggest area that has shown itself is where trust has been broken down, and coming back and trying to restore that. And so that was not something that happened in a matter of days or weeks or months. And it was a long process for us of doing the little things. And again, slowly, God has restored trust. And it's been something, again, that has been a process. So that's the biggest thing is having grace, understanding that this is not something that can change necessarily overnight, and that our hearts truly need to be continually in that place of great humility and ready to respond to what Christ is calling us to.
I love that you differentiate between the part of forgiveness that's now and then the rebuilding trust. Just because you make the decision to forgive doesn't mean you're immediately trusting again, that it's okay to allow the process of rebuilding trust to go forward. And it doesn't mean you did not choose to forgive, but that for the good of the relationship, you have to be honest about the process that's needed to rebuild.
Yes,
that's great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us just a little bit about your book. We're going to make sure that the links are available below this video and in the podcast show notes. I think it's a God-ordained time that Together Through the Storms is coming out now. So just let people know briefly about that book that you two worked on so diligently together.
Yeah, sure. Actually, we have, it's going to be hard copy, but this is the soft copy version of it. And so
great.
We wrote, there's 25 shorter chapters. We really wanted them to be very readable. And so they're broken down where we have it goes through Job. So we will have a section of Job that we're talking about, and then how that kind of connects to some aspect of the marriage or struggles that maybe marriages could be going through. And we will speak to that filled with scripture. And then we have a time at the end with some reflection questions to kind of hopefully, if both spouses are willing, to be able to talk through those together. If not, that's okay. It can be read individually because sometimes it's just more appropriate for marriage right now. And then there's journaling pages at the end of each chapter. So we wrote it to be very digestible and hopefully very applicable. We definitely have our story in it, but we didn't want it to be about us. So it should hopefully be able to really enter into any kind of trial. It doesn't need to be just what we've gone through. And we're very real about the fact that we're still in it, that we're not on the other side and we figured it all out. We're still navigating a lot of these same trials and a lot of the challenges that come with it. So we're hoping that this will be a blessing no matter where a marriage is at. Even if people haven't gone through things yet, we hope it will be a preparing for just the trials that come in life. They don't have to be big. Just living with each other can be a trial at times. So
the daily disappointments. Yes. And so we also want this to be, whether you're married to someone that is a non-believer, this is still for you. Hopefully that there's a lot of couples also that are both believers and can do it together. We hope to envision this also for small groups or life groups within a church to walk through this. So whether it's a individual or a small group setting, that's really kind of what this format would be great for.
Well, Jeff and Sarah, it's been a pleasure to talk with you. And again, thank you for being real about your storms and being willing to encourage other individuals and couples that Christ is there even in the midst of the storms and you can keep walking. I just want to say, bless you as you walk forward, your family, bless all of them as you continue. And thank you again for being with us during this time.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
I hope that was encouraging for you. There's a statement from Jeff and Sarah's book that I believe encapsulates a lot of this. Every marriage begins in the sun. Every marriage must pass through the storms. It's where and to whom we turn for hope that will make all the difference. If your marriage is struggling in this current environment, I pray that Jesus bless you with an extra measure of grace and strength. I'd encourage you to get Jeff and Sarah's book, Together Through the Storms, Biblical Encouragement for Your Marriage When Life Hurts. We'll put a link to that in the show notes just below this episode, and also links where you can find Sarah's blog. She blogs at setapart.net and is a writer in a number of other areas as well. Check out their resources and find encouragement there. I also want to let you know about something we are doing, especially in this challenging season. The Fully Alive COVID-19 Support Group is an online community where you can get expert help in all kinds of ways. You can connect with others who are seeking to find the fully alive life of Jesus even in the middle of all this mess. You can have deeper connection with me. Every week we have experts, whether it's individuals or PhDs or couples or whatever, talking about ways that your life can be better. All this for the cost of a pizza a month, $20 a month. Come check it out, fullyalivegroup.com. And if you have questions about this or any of our resources, I would love to hear from you. Send me a confidential message using the Contact Us page, and I'll respond personally. I want to thank you again for being part of our online community, part of our podcast family. I keep praying for you regularly, and we'll keep on doing so. And now until next time, may God bless you.
Thank you for listening to Relationship Prescriptions with Dr. Carol. Our purpose is to provide trustworthy resources that help you and others live fully alive in every way as God intended. If you would like to help others experience transformation in their lives and relationships, we invite you to partner with us. Text the word GIVE, that's GIVE, to the number 512-980-1620. Or visit our website at drcarolministries.com/donate to make a one-time contribution or monthly gift. Your financial support allows us to expand our message and to help others. Thank you so much, and may God bless you.